So we're going to gather at the river by singing Row Your Boat. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. Merrily, life is but a dream. Row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily down the stream. Merrily, life is but a dream. Merrily, merrily, life is but a dream. Row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Conger, your lay leader for this morning, and we're glad to have you at the UUCS, and it's a welcoming congregation, and we appreciate your unique backgrounds, stories, beliefs, or lifestyle. If you're one of our longtime members or are visiting us for the very first time, or if you're watching us online, we're glad you're here. And I especially like to welcome our guest speaker, Jerry White, and I'll be giving more of an introduction prior to his sermon. I didn't get any announcements, so I don't know what's happening in the world except for right now. So if you would take a few minutes now and meet and greet a few people, I think that would be what we do next.
Okay. That's okay.
Here, I'm Stephanie.
Stephanie, nice to meet you.
I'm working with the kids here.
Oh, lovely.
He has that.
Yeah, that's great. No, I kind of we have these rock live services, you know, the perfect ones are always live.
Yes.
Way back when you go, and the kids
Exactly.
especially.
With families.
I'm very
Okay. Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. We'll have more time to visit following this service for our coffee hour. We now turn from our informal greeting of one another to formally begin, excuse me, Jerry, the chalice.
Nope. This one here.
Yes. Sorry. We now turn from our informal greeting of one another to formally begin our service by lighting our chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and inclusion, and of our community and individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world, and a beacon of hope to those in need. And may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt where it has been found. Since our focus this morning is on water, specifically rivers, I would like my opening words to flow as water can. To aid me in this, I share this poem by Sherry Wagner. Creek Song. It begins in a cow lane with bees and white clover, courses along corn, rushes alexarondo against rocks. It rises to a teetering pitch as I cross a shaky tree bridge, syncopates a riff over the dissonance of trash, derelict ice box with a missing door, mohair love seat sinking into thistle. It winds through green adder's mouth, faint as the bells of Holsteins heading home. Blue shadows lengthen, but the undertow of a harmony pulls me on through raspy Joe Pideweed and staccato barb fence. It hums in a culvert beneath cars, then empties into a river that flows oboe deep past Indian dance ground, water wheel, and town, past the bleached stones in the churchyard, the darkening hill. And from John Donahue, an excerpt from his poem, In Praise of Water. Water, vehicle and idiom of all the inner voyaging that keeps us alive, blessed be water, our first mother.
We're going to sing I've Got Peace Like a River. That's number 100 in your hymnal, or you can watch the words on the screen. Please stand if you're willing and able. I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river, I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain, I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got love like an ocean, I've got love like an ocean, I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean, I've got love like an ocean, I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain, I've got strength like a mountain, I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain, I've got strength like a mountain, I've got strength like a mountain in my soul.
Oop, I'm sorry. Each time we gather as a congregation, there are always those who are with us in our hearts and minds and who we want to wrap in our love and care. We kindle light this morning for the casualties of the war in Ukraine. Let us share a moment in silence, embracing others who are here in our hearts this morning. You are welcome to say their names aloud as you are willing. Those named aloud and those remembered in the silence, and all those who are suffering elsewhere in our world this hour, we hold in our community of compassion. July's special collection is to benefit Meals on Wheels of Spokane and their Spokane Mid-City Concerns program. If you open your order of service, you'll find an envelope, a small envelope. Please use this if you wish to donate, and don't worry about licking it since we reuse the envelopes. Since 1967, Mid-City Senior Center has provided a nutritional and social lifeline for seniors through their downtown meal site in Spokane and Meals on Wheels delivery to elderly, disabled, or homebound seniors. The center is open 5 days a week and provides a warm, inviting, and safe atmosphere for men and women who are predominantly living alone. With the help of more than 450 volunteers, some congressional members included, serve 500 meals daily and more than 170,000 meals with each year. If this appeals to you, please donate with the envelope provided. We now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which sustains this community and its mission in the larger world.
Good morning. Our time for all ages this morning involves a little bit of movement. And the first movement that I'd like is for a couple of people to move over into section 1 over here. If anybody's able to maybe move from, thank you, Karen and Dick. Now we've got our 4 parts. So if you are sitting over here, you are in section 1. Hold up a number 1. Perfect. This is section number 2. Hold up a number 2. Section 3, and section 4. All right. So section number 1, I want you to show me your fingertips falling. Oh, perfect. This illustrates, keep moving, that rain falls upon the surface of the earth, and pulled by gravity, each drop begins to flow downhill. Section 1, keep moving. And section 2, show me your hands like this. Drop merges with drop, flowing together into a trickle, a streamlet, a creek, a mighty river, flowing onward. Good, everybody keep moving. Section 3, do this. Some of the water seeps down into the earth itself as groundwater or deep aquifers, where it will stay for days, years, or even millennia. Section number 4, until it's pulled up again by tree roots, wells, springs, and geysers, so that the sun's rays warm the water, calling it back into vapor, so light that it can rise up, 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 each molecule moving on its own again, rising into the higher temperature, or higher atmosphere, to where the air grows cool. There, the water vapor slows and cools and begins to turn again back to droplets. Droplets find droplets and join together again and again, forming clouds, growing heavier and heavier, until the weight of them pulls them down again and rain falls on the surface of the earth again. Everywhere on earth at every moment is somewhere in this never-ending cycle. Thank you for illustrating this beautiful cycle. You may rest your hands. Some of you may know I am a movement teacher, so this warms my heart to see you all moving with me this morning. You can move back to your seats if you'd like. The water cycle that you just illustrated doesn't only involve rivers and plants and clouds. It also involves creatures. The water cycles through all of us too, coming in and out of our bodies in many different ways. And that means that the molecules in our Spokane River could have been in the tears of joy and sorrow cried by the first person who ever felt love, or that the water from our church sink contains within it molecules that were in the best cup of tomato soup someone ever had, or in the blood of the mothers that birthed their grandmothers, 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 or even in dinosaur pee. So let us remember that water connects us to everything that ever has been and everything that will ever be. And that's the power of the water that we share.
Thank you, Stephanie. Now is the time in our service for our meditation. Please find a comfortable, receptive posture. Take some deep breaths. Close your eyes if you wish, as I lead you into the silence with this beloved poem by Wendell Berry, The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in the beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
I'm going to read a poem for the reading by the author Ted Hughes, an English poet that I have been recently reading a lot of. Right here, can you hear me there? Okay, perfect, or close to perfect. Fallen from heaven, lies across the lap of his mother, broken by world, but water will go on, issuing from heaven, in dumbness uttering spirit brightness through its broken mouth, scattered in a million pieces and buried. Its dry tombs will split at the sky, sign in the sky. At a rending of veils it will rise in a time after times. After swallowing death and the pit, it will return stainless. For the delivery of this world, so the river is God. Knee-deep among reeds, watching men, or hung by the heels down the door of the dam, It is a God. It is inviolable, immortal, and will wash itself of all deaths.
Thank you, Bara. That was beautiful. Jerry White became the Spokane Riverkeeper in 2014 after being an unofficial advocate for fish and rivers for many years. He has conducted education and outreach by removing litter and collecting data on water quality, shorelines, and riparian buffers. He continues to negotiate on behalf of the public regarding PCB pollution and water quality standards in our basin. Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you, everyone. It's really good to see you, and let me know if you cannot hear me or if I'm too loud. Typically, I give very give and take kind of question answer, presentations, but this one is not. This one I am delivering a sermon and I will be reading it, but I'm looking forward to it. It represents some cutting edge thoughts on the part of myself as a person and a deep foreshadowing, or if not an explicit expression of where we're going to go as an organization. In your program, the talk is called The Clean Water Act, 50 Years and Beyond. It really goes beyond that. It talks a little bit. So with that, I'll get into it. Today, I would like to once again present an approach to healing our earth, ourselves, and our communities. It is an approach that calls for us to encounter nature as animate, conscious, and intelligent. I want to share with you the idea of how this transformation as a collective legal shift and a personal shift might move us to effective environmental protection and put us in right relation with the natural world. In 2008, I left school teaching and went to work for a nonprofit that worked for healthy runs of wild salmon in the Columbia Basin. When I announced my plans to a close friend, she asked if I were going to go down to the river and ask the salmon what they wanted. I wasn't surprised by the question, as this is the kind of advice that was not unknown for this particular friend. She was, after all, an acute listener. But I wasn't ready for this question in any real sense in 2008. Since then, I take the question far more seriously. So seriously that I believe it to be the key to the work of ecological and personal connection and recovery and health. What does happen if we ask the salmon, or for that matter, the river, what they would like? Engaging in that question creates the opportunity to reframe the effort of environmental recovery in personal relation to include the object of our efforts in personal dialogue. It creates an encounter that feels revolutionary, but is actually very ancient. I believe that the question can lead us to a direct experience with nature that is interactive and reciprocal. An experience wherein we can receive the answer that is critical to the work of protection, recovery, as well as individual health and well-being. So here are some thoughts on the collective transformation for our organization at the Spokane Riverkeeper. And I believe pertains to the environmental movement as a whole. At present, much of environmentalism engages in the difficult work of protecting and restoring environments or creatures from an eminently practical and anthropocentric framework. That is to say, it does not ask any questions of the river. At the Riverkeeper, we say we are working for, and we are actually working for a fishable and swimmable river. This is the language of the Clean Water Act of 1972, which views nature as a thing that is owned and is possessed by people. It's anthropocentric and accessible to all of us in our consumerist world. This law works within, reflects the values of, and speaks the language of the marketplace. So at Riverkeeper, we sit on task forces, subcommittees, advisory boards that work in the world of data and legal cases, Zoom calls, and in the windless rooms far from the river they affect. Parenthetically, we do actually spend a great deal of time on the river on our boat as well, but the policy work tends to be in that sphere. In every case, the work is framed by this question: how is the Spokane River usable? Or how is the Spokane River of service to the human interests at the table? The paradigm is best illustrated by an analogy told me by my father. When I was a kid, he once explained the purpose of nature and biodiversity through a story about planes and rivets. The analogy was that species in nature were rivets on an airplane. If you pop every fifth rivet, the plane will still fly. However, continue to pop these rivets, and one day the plane will fly into pieces. That disaster is the basis of the stories that an Anglo civilization tells itself. That nature is a tool to be preserved, like rivets on a plane that keep us from catastrophe. And while this is true for very practical reasons, this worldview typifies values that define the environmental movement. This is in part because we live and we work in the shadow of, and as a function of, neocolonial and world capitalist systems, quite frankly. We're working to protect a resource for the marketplace, be it industrial or recreational. Nature is a thing that can be manipulated, harnessed, enjoyed, harvested, used, understood, apprehended, and acted upon as one would ride an airplane. And thus, it is here to be stewarded and preserved by humans for our satisfaction and our uses. Nowhere in this do we imagine that hummingbirds, rivers, fir trees, or trout may have their own desires, will, intelligence, or ultimately their own consciousness. Nature, for most, simply does not exist outside our own will, our own ideas of utility and purpose. However, outside this framework, outside of our Riverkeeper Zoom calls in 2022, we're all beginning to feel that something huge is happening. Something like the tides of an ocean working in concert with the moon is reshaping our world and that which will be handed to younger generations. And this thing is now happening so fast we can feel it in our bodies. We can see it, feel it, notice it. We are now witnessing the strange weather, the smoke, the warm, sickly waters. Ultimately, we are feeling, sadly, the sixth mass extinction. We're feeling the collapse of biodiversity, the very character, personality, and perhaps the spirit of our animate planet. So today, I'm standing here to say that before we can effectively help our natural community and ourselves, we need to radically reframe our understanding of our own place within the natural world, both within the environmental movement and as personal members of the natural community. We need to refine and renew our ancient understanding of nature, not as a thing, but as a set of reciprocal relationships within the community. I believe we need to relocate and renew our understanding of the problems, the solutions that we face inside that natural community. So let me begin by outlining the current state of environmental work that defines the Spokane Riverkeeper. We have 5 central pillars that define our work to protect and recover the Spokane River: native fish recovery, clean water defense, riverside litter pickup, river science, and river flow protection. Perhaps the most profound tool, in air quotes, we have in our box is the Clean Water Act of 1972, which is 50 years old this year. It is a set of laws that revolutionized our ability to protect our waterways. And while I did point up a fundamental flaw that is happening with the passage of, that's being reflected as we look back in the passage of time, this particular piece of legislation, I believe, deserves deep respect in its 50th year, as do our ancestors who worked to pass it and continue to work to enforce it. So this is where I say thank you, Clean Water Act. Thank you, those of you who had the foresight to pass this, actually while the Vietnam War was raging, and while ecological, I would have to say while a war on the environment was happening in Southeast Asia, as well as war on communities and tradition. But the Clean Water Act was bound by conditions of its time. It was passed as an extension of the English legal system, which envisioned nature and our waters as properties held in common. When the values or designated uses, in the parlance of the Clean Water Act, when the values or designated uses inherent in the property were damaged or harmed, those who could show that they were actually using the commons and had standing in court could, in limited cases, take the offender to court for the damages. So fishing and swimming, and in some cases drinking, became protected uses of the commons or the waterways. However, industry and other parties could also continue to use the waters as conveyances of pollution and the disposal of toxic garbage as legitimate legal uses. As long as that discharge of pollution and the conveyance of it had or has a permit with defined limits, it was and is protected under the Clean Water Act. These parties were and are free to harm fish, birds, and water. This continues today. For example, there are 5 large dischargers, all of whom dump hundreds of picograms per liter of polychlorinated biphenyls, which are known as PCBs, a carcinogen and an endocrine disruptor, into your river each day. It's going on right now as I speak. The city of Spokane is a known discharger for example, fire retardants called PBDEs that are showing up in the fish and the birds. A type of So our job at Riverkeeper is to sort through the mountains of paperwork, contact the arbiters of protection, which are federal and state agencies, involve the community, and I would remind you that unfortunately the budgets of these agencies, these firewalls, are determined by the politicians. So it's my job to negotiate for water and to keep the pressure on these agencies to assure that the policy firewalls reflect adequate protection of the commons, and in our case, the Spokane River. In some cases, we can use third-party lawsuits to assure that discharge of pollution to the Spokane River does not exceed legal limits. We have 2 of these legal cases underway right at this moment. And the concept is deeply affected by the law, and the concept is affected by the neoliberal context of the times in the 70s. That is, all of these uses of the inanimate nature would be protected by humans so that nature would continue to be the servant of multiple masters, not the least of which is the marketplace. So what we now know are 2 things that speak to the need of collective reform if we're to be in right relation with nature in the 21st century. As a movement, an environmental movement, as an environmental organization, we can no longer totally cooperate with a system that views nature as an inanimate collection of resources and processes put here as our playground, or our dumping ground, or our treasure trove to mine at will. I'm proposing here that we've outgrown the Clean Water Act. We need a new legal framework that creates, acknowledges, and protects the natural world around us as a community with its own ideas, thoughts, will, orientation, animation, sentience, consciousness, and intelligence. The Clean Water Act is no longer adequate to hold the expansive paradigm that assumes that the natural intelligence of the river and its living connection to the community we're a part of. Its orientation, frankly, is just too narrow. Even as it stands in the 21st century, it's no longer adequate to provide protection for the natural world, however we're in relation to it. The Act is now unfortunately riddled with loopholes and hacks that allow the marketplace to accelerate their utilitarian push to externalize economic costs to the commons, to your river, and to the world's ecosystems, and frankly to people. We have provisions like mixing zones. There are variances to the pollution limits. There's this bizarre barrier between groundwater and surface water, which was alluded to in ritual earlier. The limp regulations around non-point source runoff have all served to make the Clean Water Act simply a shadow of protection for the natural world. And I'll just say, during the last administration, several local Spokane dischargers to your river petitioned a Trump EPA and rolled back the standard that limited the dumping of polychlorinated biphenyls. They did so successfully over the protests of Washington indigenous tribes and advocates like us, who did litigate on that. And the good news on that is we will see a correction under a Biden EPA. We can correct, though, this in a big picture by establishing right relations. Spokane Riverkeeper proposes that society acknowledges the rights and then codifies in the legal system wherein the rights of rivers are afforded these rights to health and well-being, and that is enshrined in the legal system. So Riverkeeper will soon call for a new paradigm locally. One that is at once affords natural systems like the Spokane River rights to exist beyond its concept as property. It will be a legal system that could also provide protections for the Spokane Valley Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer and the creatures like trout and salmon who depend on these waters. So here it is. We're calling for recognition of the Spokane River and the aquifer to be acknowledged as having these inherent rights to exist. They should have these rights afforded and codified legally and be represented right alongside corporations, municipalities, and members of the community. Rights that would guarantee a clean, strong flow of water and healthy populations of fish, and perhaps, if the community gets involved, other rights. Doing so acknowledges their importance as members of the community with us, alongside of us, bound up in a relational web of mutual well-being. We need reform that will bring an end to ecosystems wherein market forces use excessive and relentless political pressure to continue to widen the definitions of acceptable destruction under the Clean Water Act. We need to end the race to the bottom that is unfortunately very apparent in the legal and policy interface in your waterways today. So rights of the river would allow us to say no amount of pollution is actually legally acceptable or defensible. No pollution should be allowed in our river. If we are in right relation with our river, its fish and its bird, then the dumping of PFAS, PCBs, PBDEs is no more acceptable than dumping these toxic materials into our own veins. Such a system does have precedent. It became known as the Rights of Nature movement, and it should be remembered, however, that while this new and radical idea for our Western minds, for our it's an ancient idea among the world's indigenous peoples and cultures. From Siberia to South and North America, the idea that the world is animate has been the norm for millennia. And while the English legal system orientations have often dominated court systems with property law in a post-colonial world, Ecuador was actually the first nation to write rights of nature into its constitution. The people of Ecuador amended their constitution to recognize the inherent rights of nature, or Pachamama, in 2008. This is in large part due to an indigenous rights movement that led to the Amazon basin protection in that country. Article 71 of the Constitution states that nature, or Pachamama, where life is reproduced and exists, has the right to exist, persist, maintain itself, and regenerate its own vital cycles, structure, functions, and its evolutionary processes. Closer to home, the Nimipu Protecting the Environment organization began work on formulating a resolution to the tribal council that would give the Snake River, down south of us, fundamental rights. In 2020, the General Council of the Nimipu or Nez Perce tribe adopted the resolution recognizing the rights of the Snake River to exist, flow, and regenerate. So at the end of the summer, the Spokane Riverkeeper is committing to change, to transformation. We're going to sign the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Rivers. Spokane Riverkeeper, you heard it here, is going to publicly and symbolically signal, and it is symbolically, unfortunately, it is just holding a lantern, but you all know holding a lantern is an extremely important act. But we will show and demonstrate that we are committed to the need to reframe our work and the legal system within our world to see and create right relation with nature and our river. We'll call for the Spokane River to have these inherent rights to exist and to be a healthy, and have that enshrined in our legal system. So I didn't want to leave today to talk a little bit about the two parts of this process, one of which we actually saw maybe a couple of times earlier in the beautiful ceremonies here today. And that is this effort, this transformation has an important personal component as well. If we're to successfully and be successful collectively, it will require inside work, internal work, a spiritual encounter with each human participant that will at once enhance and promote our individual spiritual, physical health, and physical health, as well as lay the groundwork to accept these new rights understand these new nature-based rights that I believe the environmental movement will embrace ultimately. Such a transformation might locate us inside of a natural encounter or a relationship with an intelligent, independent nature. I believe that we stand to recover something long lost in ourselves, an ancient orientation to the natural world that can have profound effects on our individual and collective health. If we do this, we might then one day understand that we aren't separate from nature, that we are nature. We might understand that what the late Carl Sagan meant when he said, "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." So here's some ideas to think about. And I'm adding this first one. I have several ideas, but that is participate with the UU Church. I say that after having been a part of this ceremony, this beautiful ceremony. 2, engage in direct experience with nature. Fully inhabit your body and your place. Go out there, lay in the grass, in the river, and actively listen. So go beyond mere observation and interact with nature. Seriously, go swimming in the river if it moves you, or if you wish or can. A fellow named Robin Artisan, who is a writer, again describes the difference between encounter and observation this way. A man or a woman studying a population of gazelles might spend a long time observing them without ever encountering them. Encounter here obviously means more than just having something come within range of your sense. To encounter a creature, I'll add, or a river, in the spiritual ecological sense of the word, is to experience it as a sovereign entity that comes forth with and from within itself and its kinship system, not from a Western science or story or myth. 2, ask yourself how the forest or the river is perceiving you. This fundamental question can change one's life. In his book, Becoming Animal, David Abram asked the question, how does my weight feel to these grasses? How do my steps feel to the terrain itself as I walk upon it? Number 3, don't throw out modern mathematics or scientific inquiry or the critical mind. All are essential in ensuring that the quackery of superstition does not poison your method. 4, actually I'm at 5. Remember that the way in and the way out is based on mystery. Often nothing is as it seems, so I suggest learn to understand that often we are encountering the past and the future at once in what we observe in the present. With time and practice we can begin to see this with discernment. But remember, our bodies are our instruments. And if we go far enough with encounter in our work, we might understand again what David Abrams says. The dimension of depth is ruled by Proteus, the shape-shifting god, whose dominion over sensory experience teaches us to stay loose and invite magic and expect metamorphosis. As an environmentalist, I acknowledge that we in our movement frequently view nature as a separate unconscious collection of mechanical forces, that we find it beautiful and therefore worthy of protection and recovery. So what I'm suggesting is that the environmental movement will need to work at the forefront of reframing not only the legal realities and acknowledge not just nature's beauty, but its intelligence, its animation, its consciousness, of these waters and the land in which we work, or upon which we work, or with whom with we work. The movement would benefit from listening to the object of its pursuit. And in the end, my friend Janine's suggestion of asking the salmon just what they want may represent the most rational starting point for us. Affirming the approach that is embodied in the Rights of Nature movement and signing the Declaration of the Rights of Rivers is a structural start for real protection. It's rooted in the river's right to exist. The most selfless and wise approach is the way into ancient wisdom of reciprocity. As for our personal journeys, let us never forget the words of John Muir, who once said, "I only went out for a walk and finally concluded to stay out until sundown. For in going out, I found I was really going in." So by all means, let's go out together, embrace new legal paradigms, and get involved with our rivers in a way that leads us in. If we do, we may find that the salmon, the rivers, and the mountains love us as much as we love them. Thank you.
Okay, you'll find the words to our next song in your order of service or on the screen. In honor of all rivers, we're singing Roll On, Columbia, Roll On.
Please stand as you are willing and able. Oops, we didn't.
Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Your power is turning our darkness to dawn. So roll on, Columbia, roll on. Green Douglas firs where the waters cut through. Down her wild mountains and canyons she flew. Canadian Northwest to the ocean so blue. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Your power is turning our darkness to dawn. So roll on, Columbia, roll on. Other great rivers add power to you. Yakima, Snake, and the Klickitat too. Sandy, Willamette, and Hood River too. So roll on, Columbia, roll on. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Your power is turning our darkness to dawn. So roll on, Columbia, roll on. Jefferson's vision would not let him rest. An empire he saw in the Pacific Northwest. St. Louis and Clark, and they did the rest. So roll on, Columbia, roll on. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Your power is turning our darkness to dawn. So roll on, Columbia, roll on. And on up the river, this Grand Coulee Dam, the mightiest thing ever built by a man, to run the great factories and water the land. So roll on, Columbia, roll on. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Roll on, Columbia, roll on. Your power is turning our darkness to dawn. So roll on, Columbia, roll on.
Our benediction is from Spanish poet Antonio Machado. In our souls, everything moves, guided by a mysterious hand. We know nothing of our own souls that are ununderstandable and say nothing. The deepest words of the wise men teach us the same as the whistle of the wind when it blows, or the sound of the water when it is flowing. Amen, blessed be, salam alaikum, and shalom.